recording this. So this is going to be recorded, and after the session, I'll email this out. But basically what I just showed is that once you begin connecting in, then it's actually going to connect to your Salesforce environment where we can retrieve your Visualforce page along with your metadata object structures. Now, SkyVisualEditor does not retrieve any of the physical data from Salesforce at all. We don't touch any of that. But we do retrieve the object structure so that we can help you incorporate that into your pages. So let's actually take a look at a page that we're going to break apart today. So this is a custom page that I created. Let me zoom in here. How about that? That's probably a little bit better for you. So this is a custom page that I created, and I did this a couple days ago and wanted to make a page that was actually going to cause some problems for SkyVisualEditor when we imported things. And the reason for that is I understand that you're not going to have a perfect scenario where 100% of the code that you create is going to be able to be translated by SkyVisualEditor. I get that. So that's what we're going to be simulating today, is a real-world kind of page where it doesn't go all perfect. And it's actually going to cause quite a bit of errors and warnings and stuff on the page, and I'll show you how to handle those and how to manage that moving forward. So the goal of the new Visualforce import is obviously to take this code and turn it into as many SkyVisualEditor components as possible. That's the end objective from this whole process. That way, again, when you're modifying or maintaining these pages moving forward, it's a very fast and simple process. So let me zoom back out, and we'll get started with how to do that. Okay, so let's go into SkyVisualEditor. In order to do this, we first go to File, Import Visualforce page. It's going to retrieve your list of pages, and I'll find the one that I created, and then select this. Now, it's going to do its best to interpret what I wrote as code and then turn it into components. As you can see, we got quite a few errors, and this is intentional. I want you to see how I handle these. And there's quite a bit of code at the top of the page. So let me just minimize these errors for a second. I'll go back to those in just a moment. But on the center of the canvas, you'll notice this is the actual Visualforce page that we're going to be working with in modifying. So if we look at this, several components have been imported in successfully. There's a couple of errors. The yellow represents warning messages, so I need to pay attention to those as well. And there's related lists down here at the bottom. So quite a bit got imported in, but there's still quite a bit that either caused an error or outright did not get imported in at all. And so we'll cover that in just a moment. For those of you who aren't familiar with the SkyVisualEditor layout, on the far left-hand side are all of the fields and components that we can use to modify the page. And the far right-hand side are all of the properties or the different values that you can quickly modify that get translated into code a little bit later. Let's start with the very top. If you notice, there is just raw code placed in at the top. This is not something that was available in version 3.5 of the product. There is a new component called our code block that allows you to add in raw code to the page and then to see that raw code in its entirety when it's live and on the page. And the reason this is a big benefit is primarily because of what you're going to see in this div tag right here. So if you notice, this div tag number 1 is collapsible, which is quite nice if you have large sections that are so custom that we can't import it in. But also that we nest the interior layers so that you can minimize just interior sections of a component if need be. The real power of the code block component, however, is the ability to mix and match your custom code with our componentry. So if you notice, we do have an image here. This is a SkyVisualEditor component that is nested inside of custom code that we could not interpret. So it's actually residing inside of your HTML code that we have been able to import in and didn't recognize. So you can mix and match your custom code in our componentry to truly create an environment that's very simple to modify and maintain moving forward. First thing we should start with, however, is that the page itself grabbed and retrieved all of the, scroll back up, all of the resource section up here at the top. So where did those include script go? So if we go back into SkyVisualEditor, on the right-hand side, there's a section here called Page Script. we can expand this and go to the include setting. So this is where all of your resource inclusion is going to be if it's a JavaScript reference. If it's CSS, we have a section for page styling, and it's a similar process. You'll find those resource references right there. So you don't lose those. They're simply added to another section of the product. Then if you notice at the top of the screen, it's just a pure JavaScript snippet of code. You can do one of two things. You can either leave it as is and have it at the top of the screen, or you can add it into the edit section of the page script. So if I double click this, I can copy this code, click OK, and then go back to this edit page script section, and I now can paste that into this area here and click OK. Now it's basically going to reproduce that exact same block of code when the page is actually redeployed. So I don't actually need this component at the top anymore. So it's just one less thing I have to look at on the page, and I still have all of that code tucked away into the script editor on the right-hand side. Next thing, if you notice, this h1 tag is HTML. We don't have a component for this, so it's left as the raw code. However, the text inside of it is the big thing I want to point out. It says this line of text resides outside of the Apex form tag. So if I open up this problem area down here at the bottom, you'll notice that it says that SkyVisualEditor has removed my custom form tag that was in my page. The reason for that is when SkyVisualEditor creates the page, we add in a form tag. So if we import in your page and then leave your form tag, you're going to have redundant or duplicate form tags in there, and that will cause you a lot of problems when the page is live. So instead, we strip out your form tag and then pull in your components inside of this so that it's able to be managed. Now for me to move this code outside of the form tag, I simply grab it, and if you notice there's an orange line that appears as I move this component around, this tells me where this component is going to land when I release the button. So at the very top there is an Apex form tag that's semi-grayed out. Let's go ahead and move this component outside of that form tag and drop it there again. So I've simply moved this component back outside of the form tag that SkyVisualEditor will create to reproduce that same effect that I had before importing in the page. Now I'm going to leave in this HTML that's incorporating images. We'll leave that alone, and I'm just going to minimize this. Next thing I should point out, there is this text here that says, "Hello world, this is Tony's custom Visualforce page." And it's simply an H1 tag, and instead of using this H1 tag, I'm actually going to scroll down and find SkyVisualEditor's free text component and just drop it onto this location. And the benefit of using this is that you can declaratively assign all of the content some of the CSS styling. So on the right-hand side, as an example, I can change the font to be larger, I can change it to be bold, whatever you need to do. We do have the CSS properties on the right. Now you may be saying, well, Tony, there's some custom CSS stuff that we've got for our H1 tags. We really want it to be incorporated in this text. That's fine. On the right-hand side, we have two new additional properties that you can work with, one of which allows you to do inline styling. So you can go to Style class here, and you can either add in your own inline styles or give it simply a class reference for anything that you may have in like an external CSS file or something like that. So you can add in the style classes in this section, or if you wanted to do inline styling, you can do it down here at the very bottom with additional styles. Additionally, you can create attributes for any of the components. So we'll tackle this in just a little bit. I'll leave that one alone. Also notice that if you have any comments, those will also get interpreted and brought into the page, so you do not lose your comments, and they'll simply be added into the closest location possible from where they started out in your page. Next, notice that we do have page block sections, input fields, and output fields that are successfully imported in. So this is really important because it shows that there are components that do get imported in successfully and how you can manage and just drag these things around in the future. So here's one of the great benefits of doing this. Salesforce has got the 2-column layout. Creating 3 columns in Salesforce is surprisingly difficult in raw code, but if we select this accounts field section, on the right-hand side there's a columns property. I can increase that to a 3, and SkyVisualEditor will take care of all that heavy lifting for you on the back end, and you didn't have to go in and write any of that code yourself. Next portion here is Apex page messages. We reproduce this. You can simply take that out. Then there is this other paragraph tag in here. You can do the exact same thing as I did for that Hello World section. So I'm simply going to remove that code in this example. The next part that I should point out is going to deal with our first set of issues. So I'm going to go ahead and open the problem area down at the bottom, and this is going to show us all of the warning messages and any of the errors that occur in the page. If for some reason you accidentally delete one of these warnings or errors, you can retrieve it again by going to Tools and then View Import Log. And this will show you everything that occurred in here over the span of however many days you take to work with our pages. So in case you accidentally delete something, there is an audit trail for what originally occurred for that page. The next thing that you'll see, my next set of error or warning, I should say, is this: that there's an app button that's tied to the saved page. So in this particular case, SkyVisualEditor, since we're using a standard controller, will reproduce the save action via our custom button. So it's simply stating that your custom code has been removed because we're going to do it for you. So we simply delete that, and then that yellow save button will now be unhighlighted because the error has been removed. But let's get to the first error that we truly have. And this is going to state that component 57 has got a fatal error that we don't understand this particular component that we're working with. And it doesn't understand the object reference is really what it comes down to. So if I select this, if you notice, here's component 57 in the top right, so you can identify it there. Or you can select one of these sections and it'll highlight that error. Since it's an error and it's pointing to the owner name, we use a different reference for the account.owner. And because of that, what you'll do is you'll actually strip that field out, go to our object tab, and then I'm going to find the owner ID by selecting the output fields and then created by. And I can expand the created by to gain access to the user object, and then in here I can find the full name and drag that in and put it back where it belongs. So I can drop that back in, and there's our reference. So as I do that, you'll notice that the error went away, the warning message that was occurring left. The next thing that's taken place is it's saying that there was a variable that wasn't understood and therefore was removed. So in this particular case, this is actually occurring in our data table that we imported. So if you notice, I can select this yellow section, and on the right-hand side, there is the additional attributes portion. This is where I'm actually going to add in the key value pairing. So I'll say var and then my variable to add that back into the page, and then I can click OK. Now I'm safe to delete that warning because I've actually added in that variable back to that component that it didn't understand where to put it. The next thing is that when you're dealing with a typical related list in Salesforce, the very first column on that related list is an edit and delete button inside of a single column. For SkyVisualEditor components, we have a one-to-one relationship on columns. So this is a warning stating that because there were two field edit buttons, it actually split them up into two columns, one for edit and one for delete. Now in this particular case, I want to keep the inline edit one because I do actually like that functionality of being able to click edit on a record instead of the name and it taking me to the edit version of the page instead of the display version. So I'm going to leave that one alone. However, I don't want the delete button because SkyVisualEditor has a way of replacing that. So I'm simply going to right-click and remove this. I can click the data table, and on the right-hand side, I can check delete row. And it's actually going to provide me with that delete button back to the canvas. So this is just a way of transferring your custom code that we didn't understand to a component inside of SkyVisualEditor very quickly and easily. And then the next sections down here at the bottom pertain to the contact and opportunity related list, and it's simply stating that these were moved to the bottom of the screen since they are related lists. So I can delete those messages and they'll be left alone. So as you can see, that's the basic philosophy behind importing in a page. There's some stuff that is not going to work very well because it's so custom to your environment, and therefore we'll just leave it as raw code. But for things that there's potential matches for, then you're going to have that code displayed, and you can figure out whether or not you'd like to use the SkyVisualEditor component or just use the standard functionality that you had created. The other portion down here is one where I'm referencing a global variable. And the global variable is not understood by SkyVisualEditor, so you can either leave your custom code in there, or in my case, I was referencing the user's first name and the user's last name. So in my case, I actually would not like that custom code, and I can simply add in the first name and last name to that section so that it's a little bit easier for people who aren't developers to come in and understand what I'm doing with this. Now, another thing that you can do, if for some reason you add on a field and you're not quite sure, maybe you have that error message that occurred earlier and you aren't quite sure where that field exists on the left-hand side, one of the things that you can do is select any given field, and on the right-hand side there's a field ellipsis. Go ahead and click the ellipsis, and it's actually going to give you a field bank of all of the fields that could potentially be placed inside of here. So this is every field for the object, basically. But if we know that it was supposed to be a checkbox, you can actually filter this out by the checkboxes to quickly retrieve which ones potentially could be a match for that, or you can filter by name at the top of the screen, either one of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and stop here. If you'd like to see how to deploy pages and work with those, we've got tutorials on that on our website, so I'm not going to cover that today. But I'd like to leave some time